In January, the American people sent 87 men and women representing a variety of geographic, economic, and professional backgrounds to Washington with a message that it was time to turn our economy around and preserve the American dream for generations to come. Since that time, we passed a pro-jobs budget. We passed more than a dozen pro-jobs bills, all with bipartisan support. A couple of examples would be H.R. 2560, the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, H.R. 2587, Protecting Jobs from Government Interference Act, H.R. 872, the Reducing Regulatory Burdens Act. All of these bills, again, passed with bipartisan support and are sitting in the Senate awaiting action. By contrast, not only has the Senate neglected to act on any of these bills, it has neglected to pass a budget in 888 days. I believe, as do many of my colleagues who join me today, that if Washington can just get a couple of things right, that we as America can and will lead the world out of this recession. These bills are a good start. We simply need the Senate to vote on these measures. So today, each of us here has posted this message, a pro-jobs message on our website. We're utilizing the 888 days to draw attention to the work we've done in the House on behalf of the American people and ask the Senate to join us on these measures. This message is a call to action for the Senate to get on the side of the American people and to get the Senate to hold votes on each of these measures. With that, I'm going to turn it over to 8 of my colleagues, and then we'll open it up for others to speak as well, and then we'll open it up for questions. Representative Kelly from Pennsylvania is going to be the first.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Austin. Well, I can't believe you guys put yourselves behind the 8 ball. You know, when I was playing football, my coaches used to scream that at us and would botch a play. Well, as we mark 888 days since the Senate has passed a budget, I'd like to say to the Senate leadership, I can't believe you guys have put the American people behind the 8 ball. Now, without a long-term budget, you can't run a business, you can't manage your family finances, and you sure as heck can't run a government. Passing a budget is one of the most basic legislative responsibilities Congress has. And the Senate leadership has not only punted on this, they've taken a knee. Leadership isn't about sitting on the sidelines, it's about having the courage to actually run the play. My colleagues and I in the House have asked Senator Reid to run the play. Pass a budget. Pass the pro-growth bill we've already put through the House and help us get America out from behind the 8 ball. The American people have waited 888 days to see a budget come out of the Senate. While the Senate has taken its time, the American people are taking it on the chin. With constant threats of shutdowns and showdowns over the continuing resolution, we've had enough. Mr. Reid, it's time to pass the budget and get the job done. Thank you.
Representative Rebel from Wisconsin.
888 days is a long time. My grandson had been born 888 days ago. Today he'd be 2.5 years old. He'd be able to dress himself. He'd be able to talk. He'd be able to take care of himself in a lot of different ways. He'd have accomplished a lot of things. 888 days is a reflection of what the Senate has not done. And I think the question that the media ought to start asking Senator Reid is, what are your values? A budget, more than anything else, clearly declares a principle statement and value statement of the U.S. Senate. The House has passed our budget. We've made a statement clear and true about what our values are. It's time for the Senate to do the same, because this is creating so much uncertainty in our economy that jobs are not happening, the economy is not growing, and we can't move forward in any way. It's time for the Senate to act, and I call on them to do so. Thank you.
Blake Farenthold from Texas is going to talk next.
Hi, I'm Blake Farenthold from South Texas. You know, 888 days ago, I wasn't even thinking about running for Congress. That gives you an idea. You know, it's not just a budget that's a problem in the Senate. You hear everybody talking about jobs. The president's talking about jobs. We're talking about jobs. We have passed job bill after job bill here in the House of Representatives, and they have gone to the Senate and died. I represent South Texas, the Gulf Coast, where the offshore drilling industry is key to jobs. And we have sent 3 bills to the the Senate to get jobs going on the Gulf Coast. And guess what? They're just sitting there while people are not working. The Senate needs to do their jobs. 888 days ago, I was sitting around in Corpus Christi, Texas, deciding what I wanted to do with my life. And now here I am in Congress in Washington, D.C., and I want to get people back to work. I want to get a budget passed, and I want to get this country back on the path to prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Renee?
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. The American people have had enough. They are tired of this. We keep hearing the words gridlock in Washington, that Washington can't get anything done. Well, that is not the case in the House of Representatives. As my colleagues have pointed out, we have passed piece of legislation after piece of legislation dealing with the very issues that our constituents are calling out to us. We need jobs in this country. The American people understand this issue. We need to cut excessive regulation. We need to cut spending. We need to decrease the size of government. And yet, when these bills are passed on to the Senate, Harry Reid chooses to not bring them for a vote. You've heard my colleagues say 888 days. When I tell my constituents back home that Washington has been working without a budget for that period of time, they are astounded. They don't understand how that could possibly be because they run their households with a budget, they run their businesses with a budget, and yet Washington is arrogant enough to think that they can continue on this out-of-control spending binge. So I'm asking you, the American people, call Harry Reid's office, call him and ask him why we haven't voted on these issues, and I'm also charging the press. Let's get Harry Reid in front of that camera and that microphone. Let's get some answers. Let's all work together for the American people. It's what they need, it's what they want, and the answers can come now. The solutions are in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. We've got Bob Gibbs.
Thanks, Austin. Good morning. I'm Bob Gibbs from Ohio 18th Congressional District, and I think it's all our jobs here in Congress, our responsibility to create an environment where the private sector has the confidence to invest and create jobs. And one way to create that environment is so the list that we gave out to you, those 12 bills. And it breaks down the barriers to job creation, cuts the red tape, excessive regulation, and also duplicate regulation. And I just want to highlight one of those bills on that list, and it's H.R. 872. 872 was passed by a supermajority bipartisan vote in the House in early April. It is sitting over in the Senate. It passed out of the Ag Committee, but it hasn't not moved out of the Senate. And it's important that Harry Reid moves 872 out, because if it doesn't get moved out before the end of this month, the EPA has to put in new regulations because of a bad federal court decision that's going to put oppressive cost on farmers and local governments to protect human health and safety. And so I urge, as one member, that of these 12 bills, they all need to be passed, but 872 needs to be passed in this month. And you talk about bipartisanship. Our country wants bipartisanship, and here's a bill that passed out by the supermajority of the House of Representatives in April, and it's held up by one member of the United States Senate from moving to the floor. So I urge my colleagues to pass these bills in the Senate and bring back certainty and restore the confidence, in consumer confidence and business confidence, to make those investments and create jobs and grow our economy. Thank you.
Martha Roby from Alabama.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. And I'm proud to join my colleagues today to address the American people and say all of us up here remain committed to cutting spending, to getting our fiscal house back in order. But we also understand that the key to job creation in this country is not just cutting spending, but it's reducing the regulatory burden in this country. All of us just got back from our home districts, where I know we travel around and we meet with business owners and job creators all throughout this country. This problem is real. We see it in empty cubicles. We see it when we hear from our constituents about the dollars that they're having to invest into their company only to keep up with the federal regulations and not to expand and grow their businesses. We know that job creators in this country are sitting on trillions of dollars because of this regulatory uncertainty that we have. And again, as my colleagues have pointed out, we have passed piece of legislation after piece of legislation to give the private sector the ability to go forth and create these jobs. We call on our colleagues on behalf of the American people that we represent who want to reinvest their hard-earned dollars back into the private sector. Please pass these bills, pass a budget. Let's unleash the private sector and grow this economy. Thank you.
We've got another member from Texas, Bill Flores.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm a former job creator. I helped to lead businesses that created hundreds of jobs, and so I have firsthand experience on how to create jobs. And today there are two policy options on the table. One is a centrally controlled economy that relies on spend, tax, and regulate, and on a failed stimulus program. And the other one is to do what Ronald Reagan talked about. That's to unleash the power of the American people and rely on Main Street solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, these are Main Street solutions right here. These will work. This is what Americans want. All Harry Reid has to do is ask the question, is this country on the right track or the wrong track? And 3/4 of Americans say we're on the wrong track. So, Mr. Reid, I'd ask you to do what the American people have to do every year, and that's pass a budget, and then pay attention to the Main Street solutions that we've laid on the table in good faith. Thank you very much.
We have Representative Landry from Louisiana.
Thank you, Austin. I think we can all agree that the Senate seems to not be able to do its job, so it's no wonder why they haven't been able to create legislation that creates jobs in America. And for me, it's simple. You know, drilling equals jobs. Drilling equals jobs in Louisiana, along the Gulf Coast in Texas, Mississippi, Alabama as well, and it creates jobs all across this country. We have 3 bills that would help increase drilling and create 250,000 short-term jobs and 1.2 million long-term jobs. These are numerous studies that have proven that these numbers are correct, but yet Harry Reid sits over there with 3 pieces of legislation that can instantly not only create jobs, but lower the cost of energy for all Americans out there and grant them some certainty, which is something that the business industries out there don't have. And so, you know, I would just simply ask Senator Reid and of course the do-nothing Senate Democrats to at least get these pieces of legislation an opportunity to have an open and honest debate and let them stand on their record as to whether or not they're for lowering the cost of energy for all Americans. Thank you.
Kiko Conseco has asked to speak, and then if we've got any other members that would like to speak briefly, please feel free to come up. Kiko.
Thank you, Austin. I'm Kiko Conseco from the 23rd District of Texas. And, you know, I was shocked in January when I first came to Congress to find out that we had no budget and that the Senate and the House of Representatives had not passed a budget. Now, we've passed a very good job-creating budget, a budget that's going to set our economy back on a right track. And Harry Reid refuses to look at it. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Being a former businessman and being in business most of my life, no business can survive without a budget, nor can this country. It's the blueprint for how we govern and how we get things done in this nation. And it's also the blueprint that tells the American people how we plan to govern. And I want to express one thing here before I pass it on to my other colleagues. There's a man here that is not present. And that gentleman is Democratic Whip Steny Hoyer, who in 2006, he said that enacting a budget was, and I quote him, the most basic responsibility of government. He said that on May 11th, 2006. Senator Reid, please hear and heed what your counterpart in the United States Congress had to say. Pass this budget. Thank you. I yield back to anybody else. Thank you, Randy Hultgren.
Thank you, Randy Hultgren from Illinois 14. Budgeting is a core responsibility that we have as members of Congress. And we have to recognize that the American people are sick and tired of us passing laws but not living under the same standard that we demand of them. That's got to change. They also recognize that if they failed to do something that was a key responsibility of their jobs, they would lose their job. They certainly wouldn't get their paycheck. So I think that makes sense. If the Senate continues to refuse to do their job, primary responsibility of passing a budget, they should lose their job or they should stop getting paid.
Scott Ridgel, Virginia 2, and I am so proud of my colleagues behind me. First-term members of Congress, part of a larger class that has come to Washington, and I believe we've done everything that we said that we would do. Each week we've introduced bills that would reduce federal spending in a responsible way and create a much better environment for our job creators. There are 3 bills in particular that I just don't understand why they're not being acted upon in our United States Senate. 3 bills that would move America toward energy independence and at the same time reduce our dependence on foreign oil. You know, I've been a businessman for 25, almost 30 years now, always in pursuit of excellence. And I've never been associated with an organization that had an 11% approval rating. But there's not all houses are equal here. We have been a productive House. Empirically, we can show that the bottleneck is in the Senate. So I join my colleagues today, and I hope every American stands up and says to Senator Reid, get these bills passed. Go to conference, let's work it out, we'll work weekends, and get this economy moving again.
Thanks. Dan Benishek from Michigan 1. I just spent a week in my district explaining to the people how I felt being in Congress for the first time, and it's frustrating. That's my biggest complaint, really. How is this supposed to work? You know, in the House we pass something, the Senate passes something, we come together in a conference, work out the differences, and move it on forward to the president. This hasn't been happening. It's just very frustrating. I call upon the American people to call their senators, write their senators, and have some action out of the Senate. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Bobby Schilling, Illinois 17th District. You know, it's pretty scary. When I look at this, I look at it as Harry Reid and the Senate has held the American people hostage for 888 days. You know, and it's frustrating. I'm a small business owner, and the only thing we're hearing from the other side is we need more taxes and more regulation. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not going to help turn this economy around. We've got all of these different bills that we put forward that these guys will not vote on, you know, and they continue to table. And I think the American people, I believe that the Senate has voted 80 times this year. That's about 2 times a week. You know, meanwhile, we're at around 800. But I truly do believe that the press and the American people need to call upon the Senate and say, hey, what are you guys doing? Let's get off the table and get these things voted on. And if you don't like what's in a bill, then send it back to us and we can work together and try to get this thing pushed through. It's time to get to work. Thank you.
Scott Tipton out of Colorado 3. So we look before here, we see 888. I just came back from my district, 10, 10, 10, and more. We're talking unemployment rates in my district. We have to be able to get the American people back to work. We're trying to send a message to Senator Harry Reid that it's time to put people before politics, policy before pandering. We need to get this country moving once again. So we have a message for our U.S. senators. Pass these bills now. The American people are counting on you.
Sandy Adams from Florida. You know, last week I met with a lot of my business owners, and they said, what are you doing in Washington, D.C.? Are you doing anything? And then you start telling them about the 888 days that the Senate hasn't passed a budget. And also then you start telling them about all the bills that we have passed that would move jobs, create jobs, get our economy going again. And they go, where are they? And I tell them, they're in the Senate. And I came from a state legislative body. And in that legislative body, we may not have always agreed with the Senate, but what actually happened was we would pass a bill, they would pass theirs, they would bump off each other. Next thing you know, we would be sitting down, conferencing these issues out for what was in the best interest of our state. And all we're asking for from Harry Reid is, let's sit down and talk, pull the bills up, see where there's differences, if there are any differences, but at least pull the bills up so that we can come together for what's in the best interest of our country and get our people back to work. And that's what our job is here. It's not politics. It's what's in the best interest of our country and getting our people back to work. Thank you.